in the case of being a Samaritan, you listen and you don't judge and you don't give advice. It's very powerful. It's and you can, I've had the, people who ring up, they have all sorts of issues, but sadly sometimes you're dealing with someone who is in the act of suicide, and that is probably one of the most powerful things as a human being you can do to help someone.
Well, hello, folks. Today I'm here with Steve Roebuck, who runs a charity called Smile of Hope. I had a conversation with Steve a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, wow, he's doing some really interesting stuff, and his personal story and journey is very interesting. So I thought I'd get him on this podcast. So thanks for joining us, Steve. And for those that don't know you, can you give us a little bit of an intro to yourself?
Okay, I'm a 64-year-old man, slightly overweight, married to Sandra with 5 cats, and live in Mottingham, where we run a charity called Smile of Hope. And also, part of my journey is I was in the Priory 20 years ago and I went into rehab, and so I'm active in AA, and that side of my life is equally as important to me.
Wow. Well, that's an interesting topic to start off. So let's kick off by asking you, what is Smile of Hope?
So, Smile of Hope is a small children's charity we set up 11, 12 years ago. Originally, it was called Lily's Smile, named after a little girl that was terminally ill. And the parents were part of the charity. And so we started about trying to help families with terminally ill kids in Essex. And it grew from there.
And how long has it been going now? Where did you start?
So well, if we go back 20 years, we started working with the hospice trying to raise funds. And I set up an event with Rob called "I'm a Banker, Get Me Out of Here." That ran for 9 weekends. At the end of February, which was the anniversary of my recovery coming out of Priory, and we sort of initially were going to sleep in a tent, 2 of us. First year there were 56 of us, and over the 9 years we raised over £1 million for the hospice, which was a staggering amount. And then when my wife was diagnosed with incurable illness, we decided that we couldn't continue at such pace, so we set up Lily's Smile, which was the forerunner to Smile of Hope.
Well, that's an incredible story. And obviously, you've been hampered by very difficult situations with personal family tragedies. When that happened to you, how did you respond?
Well, fortunately, going into recovery, gave me toolkit to live my life. In recovery, I've lost both my mum and dad in very difficult circumstances, quite tortuous circumstances, and so you just live a day at a time, and just look to have a good day each day, and that's the way I live my life nowadays. To be honest with you, and Sandra is alive and kicking, and maybe we're just blessed, I think.
Let's talk about that if we can, Steve. I mean, obviously, you've talked about going into recovery and difficult situation with both of your parents. Let's talk about the situation that led you to alcohol in the first place. I mean, what was going on in your life? Because it sounds like a strange accumulation of very difficult challenges that were happening in your life.
Oh, well, I guess, I started drinking probably at 16, and drank with my dad. He and I were best mates, play snooker, drink, and it was quite normal to drink, fall over, a blackout, and just thought it was a normal part of life. I left school at 16, went to a tough grammar school, which hated at the time, and went to work in a bank, and sort of through working hard and playing hard, and probably drinking too much, I progressed. In those days, being an alcoholic in a bank probably wasn't out of place, to be honest with you.
Well, I can certainly relate to that, Steve. I did a couple of years in the late 80s, early 90s, in the banking culture, and it was very, yeah, especially Friday afternoon,
Oh,
lunchtime.
yeah. It never ends. Yeah.
It was a very different culture. So, do you think that that almost English culture led people towards alcoholism?
Yeah, well, I can only talk personally. I mean, I see myself as an emotional cripple. It's an emotional illness, addiction. And so, for me, alcohol and gambling were ways for me to escape. For others, I think all different reasons, but, only people know if they're an alcoholic because they can't stop, and in my case, 20 years ago, 20 and a half years ago, I had my last drink and my last gamble. And, and if I started again tomorrow, then all bets will be off. I'll be away with the fairies and probably dead fairly quickly after, I imagine.
Fair play. I mean, that's quite a journey that you've had. What would you say was the what was the day that you woke up and you realized this has got to stop? What was the trigger? What was the final straw?
If I'm really honest, my foot hurt, and I went to see a doctor because I thought I had gout or something. And I went to see this doctor, and he talked to me, and he asked me a very strange question. He asked me if I was happy, and I remember saying to him, "What a stupid question to ask me! I've come here about my foot, not about happiness." And I was probably less polite than that. But he said, "Can you talk to a friend of mine?" I spoke to a guy called Dr. Brenner who worked for the Priory, and he very quickly diagnosed me as an addict and said, "I can help you if you want to be helped." And for some reason, I said yes. I waved the white flag.
Wow. And what personal circumstances do you think accumulated that led you to that point?
Well, I probably, I sort of didn't really talk about feelings. My dad was a bit of a tough norther, and I suppose I lived pretty much a bit of a solitary, selfish life, and definitely wasn't the best husband and father in the world. But and I went on this roller coaster of excess, which was getting faster and faster, and so something had to happen. So there for the grace of God, I went into rehab, and since then turned it around.
Well, kudos to you. And I mean, I guess from people that don't have that experience, what would you say about rehab that it was that really put you on the right track? What are your key takeouts from that experience?
If you'd have asked me in the first 10 days, I would have told you it's a full of mad people talking about things I wasn't interested in, and I was still in that selfish, arrogant banker mode. But what happened is I did something called psychodrama, which I ripped my guts over emotionally, ripped them open, and I guess I found feelings for the first time, and through that, I realised that I needed to talk about things, and try and tackle the problems I was facing, and most of them were up here, to be honest with you.
So psychodrama was a big trigger for you. For
That
people
was
that don't understand it.
that was the trigger for me into, but the rehab is fantastic. If people who are struggling and can afford to go into it or get access, it's a luxurious way of starting treatment. Going into an AA meeting cold, or people who do that have my maximum respect. But it's much easier if you can go into rehab because they're trained and very supportive, and you get a peer group that will help you to sort of hopefully stay safe.
What does psychodrama involve? I mean, obviously, you sort of got an idea in my head just hearing the title, but what is it, and was that part of the rehab?
Yes, so psychodrama is about where in my case, I acted out the members of my family.
Sorry, could I just interrupt? Sorry, do we need Harry?
No, go away. It's a bit like that child entering the room.
Well, I guess, Steve, one thing that will say is that your relationship is obviously a hell of a lot better these days. So maybe
yeah.
that was that was the essential link to this this podcast.
And she is the chairperson of SmileofHope. So a bit more deference, I suppose.
Well, it certainly brought a smile to the podcast, so I think that's very appropriate. We'll leave that in the final cut, I think.
I told all the helpers who were working here not to interrupt. I forgot to tell the wife. So, it's like, normally she wouldn't talk to me, so I misjudged that one. Where were we?
Fair play. We're talking about psychodrama.
Psychodrama is a sort of way you sort of do acting in order to challenge your emotions, and if you connect with it, it's extremely powerful, and it's almost like a dam bursting. In my case, it was I couldn't stop myself from just letting go, and so that was the start of the recovery, really, for me. That would have been about the 17th of March 2004, probably something like that.
Well, that's incredible, Steve. So from that point onwards, from getting out of that, going through the psychodrama, um, what was the journey then? Did you go straight into Smile of Hope? What happened? What was the next steps for you on the rehab?
So probably, as I say, my friend had a daughter who was diagnosed terminally ill, Lily. So as I came out of recovery, I needed to keep myself busy, obviously stop drinking and gambling, but also channel my energies into something useful. So we decided that we would fundraise for this hospice, Little Havens in Essex. So we planned that for 6 to 9 months, and then the first event was 1 year on the anniversary of me coming out of the Priory. That's when we initially thought we'd pitch up in a tent, the two of us get sponsored. There were 65 of us in a tent, and then each year it took a lot of time and effort. Each year for 9 years, we sort of grew that event, and obviously it meant my relationship with Lily and his wife Sarah was was strengthened to the core, really.
And so how much would you say is building a community? Is that feels like a big part of the journey here for you, Steve? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, even in my drinking days, I was, volunteering, helping run the British Legion Club in Chislehurst with Sandra, and we've done some other charity events before that. Community, if you'd have asked me, in my active drinking days, I probably would have said I don't really give a shit about it. But what I realised is that I found myself as a person, and I realised that I had the ability to help others. And one of the other things which I did a few years into, maybe a couple of years into recovery, I became a Samaritan. Went for the interview, told them I'm a recovering alcoholic, a banker, maybe I don't qualify. They said, yeah, you'll do. And so for 15 years, I became Samaritan. Through being a Samaritan, you learn a huge amount about yourself. Absolutely, changes you as a person as much as recovery did.
Well, that's an incredible journey in itself. So tell us, to somebody that would be considering being a Samaritan, how would you sell that to them?
It's life changing. It's life changing. It's one of the most powerful things that I've ever done. It's a way of helping others, but not interjecting yourself into the process. Normally you have a conversation, you start saying something, and then I have to come back and tell you about my illness or my this or my that. In the case of being a Samaritan, you listen and you don't judge, and you don't give advice. It's very powerful. It's and you can, I've had the, people who ring up, they have all sorts of issues, but sadly, sometimes you're dealing with someone who is in the act of suicide, and that is probably one of the most powerful things as a human being you can do to help someone.
Wow, well, that really is life-changing stuff, Steve. So it sounds like all of this trauma has led you to a much better path. And how would you describe that journey, what it's been, and how it feels to be where you're at now?
Um, it's about growth. I mean, that's where recovery talks about, day at a time, growth, helping others, and they often draw the analogy, as I used to drive the car and be a control freak with road rage. Now I sit in the passenger seat and somebody else drives my car, my life, and they talk about higher power. And it might sound a bit godly what I'm saying, and I'm not a religious person. And if you'd have said to me 20 years ago, I would have said, you sound as if you've had too much to drink. But the reality is that, I found peace, if I'm honest. And through peace, you can I've found that I can do some pretty amazing things and enjoy myself, and that's what I try to do. I retired 5 years ago, and so the good thing about working in banking is it gave me a pension. The rest of it's a blur, if I'm honest.
Fair play. So if to somebody that's in the thick of an addiction, that is an alcoholic, that is a drug addict or whatever, what would you say to them?
Get to a meeting. Just go to a meeting, and whatever happens, go to the second meeting. So you go first time. I went first time. I thought, well, crazy, didn't get it, couldn't relate to it. Some don't feel that way. I did. I would never have gone back. It was only I was forced to through rehab that I went back. But for anyone who's struggling out there, pick up the phone to AA or NA or CA. Talk to somebody who is not paid. They're just people like me that will talk to you about helping you. They'll take you to a meeting and just give it a try. It may not work first time round. It might. In a case of a friend of mine, I did that with her. She left and went off on her own thing for a year, came back and took her to another meeting. Now she's over 2 years clean and doing amazing work in recovery and a real role model. You can change your life, but you just got to want to. You can't be only I can really keep me on the straight path. I need help though. That's the thing. If isolating is not it doesn't work.
I think that's probably the case for a lot of people, but that's very sage advice. Now, obviously, Steve, we've braced upon terminal illness here, and you have experience in that department. To people that are experiencing a loved one that has been given a terminal illness, what would you say to them?
It's tough, right? I mean, I remember when I was told my dad would, Christmas Eve, he'd be dead by Boxing Day. And I nearly relapsed, and my dad survived 6 weeks before he died, and it was torturous. But I realized I needed to be there for him. I needed to emotionally connect with him, and so I tried to focus my energies on him rather than me. And it's not easy, people, you just, for me, it was about, all I can say is about what it was for me. Just get through each day, just sort of, do little baby steps. I pretty much stopped work for a period, and I was able to, support particularly my dad, through a tortuous time. And also obviously my mum, who was equally in bits, and, just there's no magic formula, unfortunately. And there's lots of, the hospices nowadays, they have great support. You've got other charities. If it's cancer, then, it's about talking. The Samaritans are wonderful. You can pick up the phone 3 a.m, like I did on Christmas Eve day, 2 days before I was told my dad would die. And I just talked to them, even though I was a Samaritan. I actually rang the Samaritans and said, look, I just need to talk. I just need to offload. And it doesn't make it go away. It doesn't solve the problem, but it's that pressure valve in my head which was released a little bit and let me go to sleep that night.
That's really interesting, because obviously with sort of suicide, men are particularly bad at doing it. And would you say that is because they don't pick up the phone, they don't offload? How important a role would you say that is in mental health?
Well, that was me. If I go back pre recovery, then certainly, I never touched my feelings. I used to, if I do a life story in AA or a share or chair, I often talk about putting my feelings in a box and sticking it up in the loft, and sticking more boxes in the loft, and at some point the ceiling starts to bow, and at some point that ceiling is going to crash. And and I think that's true. I mean, we're all humans. We've all got our own feelings, but how we process them is pretty much key to how we live our lives. And sadly, some people can't deal with them and feel they need to escape that. And I, as I say, I've experienced that in my Samaritan life, and I just I feel a bit sad, but at the same time, everyone has a choice, and it's trying to get enough support to make the right choice. But ultimately, we're all, self-determination is the key in life. I believe that we all deserve the right to choose, and that's interesting. What happened, a couple of days ago with the MPs. I think it's a positive thing personally. I'm sure others would argue differently.
Well, that is a very topical and interesting thing. So let's get your thoughts and feelings on, and just to clarify, I'm talking the right to end life, that this has
Yeah.
been passed. Let's go down this rabbit hole a little bit, Steve. Why do you think that's a good idea?
Well, I saw my dad, on that Christmas Eve. They taking him off all medication. His body started to expand radically. He sort of, and then and then over the next month, his body shrank skeletal. And during that period, they were just giving morphine, no medication, and they all knew that he would. Again, they thought he'd die in 2 days, but he died in 6 weeks. And you wouldn't treat a dog like that. And if my dad had had the choice to take something and just drift away, he would have happily taken that. And I saw that in really up front and center. And the day my dad died, actually, I'd seen him every day. And the day he died, I was filling up petrol in the petrol station outside Farnborough Hospital, and I cried with joy because it was a relief that he'd finally gone, because there was no way back. And so if my dad could have had that option, then he would have taken it. And that's all I can say. It's a very personal thing. I'm not religious, and so I don't consider the religious aspects of it. I just look at how I feel I'd want to be if it came to that point. There are some risks associated with it, but dying in pain, in torture, which my dad did. I used to go in and hold my dad's hand as he's screaming pain as they wash his back every day about 4 PM. It was heartbreaking, and the point is that it was prolonging life, but for what cost?
I agree with you, Steve. Having worked at the end of life, I would definitely say that there is an absolute place for it, and I feel the same way as you do. I guess the question would be, where do you draw the line? What if you've got somebody in their sort of mid 40s or whatever it is that's feeling suicidal and going through a bad time? I guess there's a lot of shades of grey in this little in this little box, but I absolutely agree with you.
And I've spoken to some of those people. Bear in mind, as a Samaritan, I used to do overnights on Saturday, and I wouldn't say very often, but I've probably done 20 suicides in progress where people are in the act of taking their own life, and so I heard their stories, and I heard their reasons for wanting or in the act of doing it. Some changed their mind and some didn't, I think there's a difference between assisted dying and suicide, huge difference, and I wouldn't. I think someone committing suicide where they could be because the physical and mental pain is too much is, there must be a better way, surely. But as I say, it's a very tough subject, and I can only say from a personal experience. I'm not a doctor, but Christ, there must be a way of doing it. This new ruling they're looking at, where 2 doctors have to get involved, and it sounds like there's some safeguarding there. That's all I can say.
Fair play. I do agree with that, Steve. I mean, what would you say from your experience, especially in the Samaritans, are the main triggers that cause suicidal thoughts or suicidal intention?
Oh, they're too broad and wide to, often it's, at one level, someone is terminally ill and wants to expedite things, and that's sort of emotionally understandable. But then, there's lots of cases where shame is involved, trauma, is involved, where, and also people who, people can really be affected by things which you and I may not feel are so serious or whatever. So, relationships are a massive part of it, obviously, and also where you lose someone, you feel there's nothing left to, nothing left to live for, and this it's quite broad and deep, and bear in mind, as a Samaritan, I probably talked to a lot of people, but a huge number never rang up and probably just went away and did what they did, and no one will ever know why. But the one thing I would always say is that the people who are left behind, should never look for self-recriminations. I mean, at the end of the day, if somebody wants to do that, then they'll pretty much do it, and you can't prejudge as to why. You just got to almost accept the fact that it was their choice, sad as that may be.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a very well-rounded perspective. So let's take all of this. We've talked about a lot of the pain, the trauma that's led you here. Let's talk about the here and now and Smile of Hope. Tell us, what are you up to? What are you looking to do?
So Smile of Hope, we're sort of growing. Just to put it in scale, we raised about end of July 23, we raised about 40 grand. July 24, 65 grand. We've just been awarded a massive grant to help us grow the charity and build it. And so we basically raise money mainly through selling stuff from our house. So we're fortunate to have a big drive where we can, we sell often on Sundays. We make over £1,000 on a Sunday selling stuff. And then the main thing is helping kids. So we split our money into, predominantly it's sort of kids with life-limiting illnesses, autism, special needs, and sort of eating disorders. That's one bucket. And then the other is sort of art and drama and music and sport. And the majority of, and also, we work with various partners. So we generally don't work too direct with the public, generally through specialized partners, and they do all the hard work, and we help fund them.
Fantastic. And who's your perfect connection now? Who are you hoping watches this video and thinks, right, I need to speak to Steve?
Someone who's got lots of money, maybe a corporate that wants to do good. They they have a CSR budget. They're used to dealing with large charities who are very polished. They've got very smart chief execs, and these firms do amazing work. But we're a small charity run from our house. You just saw the chairperson come in. You don't get paid, nor do I. We're looking. We sell stuff, and we've capacity. It's bloody hard work running the charity and selling stuff. What we're trying to do is to raise money through sort of non-trading, and then trying to use that money to build partners and to help kids in various ways. And so, the best person looking out there would be someone, a corporate who wants to do some help, not sure where they want to spend their money. They can come to us and we'll say, look, we've got a menu service. If you want to spend £3,700, then I know a child in India at the moment is looking for a heart surgery because we've done 21 of them. If you want to help a child that needs a break in Disneyland, Paris, or Center Parks, and you want to help them, I know a child out there that will be looking for help. If you want to help a child that is suffering with anorexia and eating disorder and in a really bad way and maybe self-harming, and you want to help get them some counseling, then I can help with you that as well. So there's various ways as a charity we partner others in order to help kids. And there's lots of other things as well, but that just give you a flavor of how we could spend your money if you want to, point us in that path.
That is great, Steve. I mean, love your journey, love what you're doing, and hopefully this little interview will give you a little bit more broader exposure. And for anyone that watching it that wants to get in touch with you or find out more, how do they do that?
So the website is smileofhope.org.uk, and Dave Hurrell manages it for us and does a great job. And there's lots of information on the website. Facebook, we're Smile of Hope UK. My lovely wife manages that. There's about 2,300 likers and followers, and that's pretty dynamic towards the sales. And if you want to come and buy some took from our house, then there'll be a sale looming soon, and we've got one in Grove Park Library mid-December, 15th December, and yeah, if you're really bored, then we have there's on the website, there's a 45-minute radio interview with Maritime Radio, John Reen, and his colleague, and that gives you a deeper flavour about us, and you'll hear from the wife who doesn't like to speak normally.
Well, we've had a guest appearance today, Steve, so
Yeah.
really appreciate your honesty, your openness, and your journey and what you're doing. I think it's phenomenal. And I shall leave all of those links in the description to the video. Just like to thank you for joining me today and wish you the very best of luck with what you're doing.
Thank you.